Good afternoon. I pray that your Monday you found spaces and places of joy, of peace, of happiness, even as you negotiated this disrespectful heat. Here where I live in Maryland, we've been under a heat advisory where they're advising you to stay in the house, and I understand other parts of the country are going through that. So I pray that you found a space to continue to cool off, a space for those of you who love the sun. I know you are basking, but for those of us, too much of anything is a lot. I pray that you found spaces and places where you can find joy in spite of the heat. We're continuing to talk about toxic relationships, and we're building our way to it. You may say, well, she hasn't talked that much about the relationships yet. I'm building it because this page is for people primarily who have been healing from traumas with a lot of emphasis on childhood traumas. And so how we choose who to be in relationship with or how we show up in our relationships is very much impacted by what we experienced growing up, what our role models look like, the messages that we heard. And if you have been traumatized or grew up in a dysfunctional household, those messages and those things that you experience definitely impact your ability as an adult to be in relationship. So today we're talking about living on high alert. And another term for that is what's called hypervigilance. But I'll stick with living on high alert. If you grew up in a dysfunctional household, if you grew up having experienced childhood trauma, if you've experienced any type of trauma, but I want to focus on growing up in those types of households, you learned as a survival technique to be on alert, to try to keep yourself as safe as possible. If you grew up in a household with a raging alcoholic parent, you knew that some people, I've had clients tell me, when they heard that parent open the front door, they could tell by the footsteps what type of day or evening it was going to be. They could tell when they came home from school, if they grew up with a parent who maybe had a mental illness that was undiagnosed, they could tell simply by the way the house looked or different smells that may be coming from the house. They went on, it's almost like their spidey sense kicked in, and they were surveying to make sure that, okay, what am I going to encounter? How am I going to keep myself safe? How am I going to keep my siblings safe? If you incurred other types of traumas, let's say combat trauma, what you develop in order to try to stay safe again is you stay on high alert. But the problem with that, because we always talk about balance, we talk about it's a good thing. It's not. Well, let me do it this way. It's not necessarily a good thing to never pay attention to anything, to never pay attention to your surroundings, never pay attention to what may be in your environment, what may be safe or unsafe. That is really naive and it's not good. But it's also not good on the other extreme to constantly be on high alert. Because for one, it keeps you in an exaggerated state of anxiety. And staying in an exaggerated state of anxiety can have an effect on you physiologically. It can increase your blood pressure. It can increase the amount of work you're forcing your heart to do because your heart is beating fast. It can mess with your sleep. And so we never want to operate on extremes. We want to operate in balance. So let's talk about how it affects our adult relationships. So we make the decision, now we're no longer children, and the threat to our lives is no longer on a day-to-day basis, but our inside, our reptilian part of our brain doesn't remember that. It doesn't recognize that. So we're still operating with these survival techniques, these survival plans and skills that we needed as children, but we no longer need now. And so we meet that special someone and we begin a relationship, but rather than being able to get to know the person for themselves, rather than being able to allow the person to get you to begin to share some shared experiences, we are on high alert. In the back of our mind, we're wondering, okay, this seems too good to be true. When is this person going to mess up? We are on high alert. We're looking for something to go wrong. We are on high alert to the point that if the person, we're analyzing almost everything the person says. If they say, you look nice today, in our mind, we've interpreted it as, well, what about the other days? What are you trying to say? If they say, I was actually watching this TV show, which is kind of cute. It's talked about Married at First Sight. And one of the couples, her issue, one of the things she said to this new husband she's just met is she said to him, you compliment me too much. And he was like, well, what does that mean? And what her backstory is that she had not been in a real relationship for 10 years because 10 years prior, her relationship had not gone well. So it had developed a distrust. It had developed her being suspicious. And so in her mind, why is he complimenting so much? What is that about? She could not hear that the compliments were things that he actually liked about her, that he was being sincere. She heard it as being suspect. And some of us are guilty of that. You know, no matter how good things are going, no matter how well people are attempting to treat us, we're not able to receive it because we're on high alert. We're still in survival mode. We're still in protection mode. And so let's take it out of intimate relationships and let's move it to relationships with your children or other family members. You know, if you are distrustful, if trust is a big issue for you, then you don't really trust your children. You don't really trust your siblings. You don't really trust anybody. So even if they tell you something good, in the back of your mind, you're on high alert. If they say, oh, is it okay if I go play with so-and-so? Your mind is already gone to no, because if they go there, something's going to happen to them. And, you know, and you've already catastrophized it. And so our challenge today, the work I would invite you to consider is how, if this has described you, if you find yourself living from a place of distrust and you're always on high alert, one of the things that you can do, and I am going to give a suggestion right now, is to really incorporate quiet time to help to quiet those negative thoughts and to find time to physically move. Because as you increase the endorphins in your body, it helps to increase, I guess it's the serotonin levels, which are almost like the happy levels inside of you. You know, we have to counter those negative thoughts. We have to recognize that there are some pretty scary things in this world. There are some things that we really need to be mindful of, but we need to not operate at extremes. Everything is not a catastrophe waiting to happen. I've talked to people who could express in the moment they were happy, but they were afraid to be happy because they were afraid something was going to happen to that happiness. So they don't even get to enjoy that state of euphoria. They don't even get to enjoy that state of just feeling well pleased. And that's not how we've been designed to live. We've been given life so we can have it more abundantly. We have been given life so we can enjoy the beauty in the midst of all this other stuff. There is beauty that surrounds us. And so I invite you to consider, as we look at toxic relationships, how much does your need to, or your practice of being on high alert, how much has that impacted your relationships? How much has that limited your life? How much has that stopped you from being able to have some wonderful experiences? And let me just say this real quickly. I think the underlying piece of living on high alert is we're not just because it's because of our safety, but the underlying piece is just fear. And if we allow fear will ruin our lives. Fear will keep us locked up in a cage in a closet, and all this goodness will be happening around us, and we won't even be able to see. We'll start to enjoy that cage. We will convince ourselves that I didn't need anybody, I didn't want anybody, I'm okay because people are distrustful, they'll do this to you because it's happened to me before. You know the litany. But it takes courage to let that go. It takes courage to take a baby step in trust. It takes courage that when you have these thoughts about the worst thing that could happen to counter it with, but just suppose that doesn't happen. Just suppose things go well. Just suppose this person is telling the truth. And let's say they are not telling the truth. That doesn't mean the end of the world. Just because this person was untruthful doesn't mean the next person will be equally untruthful. My goal for you all, beloved, is to be able to be all that you've been called to be, and to be able to enjoy some of the beauty of this thing called life, and to be able to do that with intention and on purpose. I am rooting for you. I have faith in you. I know that if you take the courage to take baby steps, those steps will become bigger and bigger, and you will begin to embrace and love the life that you have set out to live. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.